Well, it was just the other day that Lee was sighting in his little Bergara 308, and I was helping him out. I was his technical assistant, and afterwards I realised that we quite often get asked, how do you sight your hunting rifles? And I thought, well, that's a fair point, stuff that we probably take for granted. So I'm going to have an attempt to explain it. I'm not going to go through every terminology, so I'm going to hope that you understand some of the things that I'm actually saying. I'm pretty sure if you're into hunting and whatever, you'd understand line of sight, which is basically a straight line through your sighting device. In most cases on a rifle it's a telescopic sight. And then your trajectory, which is the flight of the bullet when it leaves the barrel. Now, obviously my little stick here, well actually not obviously, my little stick here is my rifle barrel, and the big stick here is my scope. Now the scope, majority of the times, well, every rifle that I've seen, the scope is above the barrel. So in other words, you need to get that bullet to cross that line of sight, you need to create an internal angle or some adjustment with the inside of that scope or sighting device. How that happens, I couldn't explain that, but bottom line is getting that angle correct so your line of sight and your bullet trajectory cross twice. But getting them to cross twice is the key to it, and a lot of things determine this. Knowing the trajectory of that round you're using. Now in this case I'll sort of explain what Lee was using, which was the 308 150 grain. Actually I think he used some factory ammunition, the Superformance 150 grain, just to try it. And all the rise and fall of that bullet is actually printed on the box, or you can go on their website. I'm sure most people understand that, or how to get that information. Now one thing I'm going to sort of speak about that often isn't mentioned is what I class as kill zone. Now the kill zone, I find the best way to explain that is basically the area that you can afford to hit on that live target I'm talking about, whether it's rabbit, deer or whatever. Now for argument's sake, if you were trying to head shoot rabbits, you're probably talking maybe 2 to 3 inches of height in a rabbit's head. So that means that you can aim in the middle of the head and afford to be 1.5 inches high or low, 1.5 inches, about 38 mil, over your line of sight. Now once you go out, in other words, once you go out of that 1.5 inches, or bullet drops below 1.5 inches of your line of sight, that's pretty much the effective range of that caliber you're using, unless you start to hold over. And I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to purely talk about sighting your rifle to get the best out of it for aiming dead on at where you want that projectile to hit and hitting within the kill zone. Now on a deer, obviously that kill zone is going to be larger, and you're probably talking somewhere, depending on the size of the deer, up to about 6 inches. So that could be 3 inches rise and fall, and obviously depending on the caliber, how fast it is, will determine how far out you can aim dead on and still hit either high or low, but within that 6 inch radius, and hit on the money in the kill zone. Now this height between where you're aiming and the top of the kill zone is what I class as the top of your trajectory. Now getting that correct is where sighting your rifle for the correct caliber, the correct distance, is very important. Now let's have a look, for argument's sake, with Lee's rifle, the 308, the 150 grain. We were going for a 200 yard zero. So that means we had to start off with, we sighted at 50. Now often we'd sight at 100, but because it was a red dot, no magnification, we sighted at 50. So we did a bit of homework and realised that approximately 1/2 inch high at 50 yards should give us a 200 yard zero. So we set the target up at 50 yards and fired away. Now this is the other thing, don't keep firing your rifles. If you're doing it for a hunting situation, let the barrel cool, and I'll go into it a bit more in a second, but your final shot should be off a cold barrel in my opinion. So bottom line is, fire 2 shots or more. There's no need to fire 5-shot groups unless you're testing ammunition, or once you know your ammunition groups well or whatever, and you're sighting your rifle in, work out the average of that group. And in this case, we wanted that to be half an inch higher than where we're aiming. So in other words, if we're aiming dead on at the center of the target, we want the average of the bullet impact to be half an inch, or say 12 to 13 mil high from that center of the target. That then gives us a maximum rise of probably around 1.5 to 2 inches, and that'll be in your mid shooting range of probably around the 120 to 150 yards, dead on at 200. And then probably, don't quote me here, but it's probably around 6 inches low at 300. And you've probably gone, if we were talking and wanting to get that 3-inch kill zone or a 2-inch kill zone, we tend to stick to that 4-inch circle, 2 inches from rise from the line of sight to the major height. On the faster calibers, I tend to come down a little bit lower. Again, it depends. This kill zone is very important, making sure that you don't get your rise and fall or that projectile too great or too small. And that's another problem. Many people often have their projectile coming down and only crossing once, and they say, oh, I'm happy with that, but they're not getting the best out of their rifle. So match your caliber, your sighting distance to the kill zone that you require, and understand your bullet's flight, and get the rifle sighted as good as you possibly can. You will start to reap the rewards. It is important when people often say, oh yeah, I've got it half an inch, oh it's 3/4 of an inch high. It doesn't matter, it's close enough. Well, what you're doing, it's actually worse. If you move that up to sort of 3/4 here, you've actually increased that angle, and you'll probably go up to 3 to 4 inches possibly at the highest point. And then you'll be firing over the top or hitting animals in the wrong location. So put the time in, get your initial sighting right, and then on a cold barrel, go back, set it to the 0 point, and try and fire it like you're in a hunting situation, and then do your final checks at that 0 distance.